Hello and welcome to a fabulous edition, a fabulous session of Peer Workers United, a support group for peer specialists all over the country. And today we have a very special guest, Ruth Riddick. Ruth is a dynamic force whose journey has spanned continents and causes, from marching the streets of Dublin for women's rights to shaping national conversations around peer support in the USA. A lifelong truth seeker and creative spirit, she began her public life as a performer and activist in Ireland, where she championed reproductive rights and social change. Ruth has embraced writing, publishing poetry and fiction while continuing her advocacy as a national leader in the peer support movement. Welcome, Ruth.
Well, you leave me speechless, Dan. And let me tell you, that's a hell of an achievement, leaving an Irish person speechless, if only for a moment.
Oh, well, you know what, Ruth, you have the floor. You could speak. We don't have anything prepared. You and I, we this is months in the planning, and it's months in the planning, but yet this is a totally spontaneous spotlight on you, Ruth. Whatever you would like to share with us.
Well, first of all, I'd like to share how honored I am to be here, Dan, to be honest with you. I think that throughout the worlds of substance use disorder and the mental health system, that peers have been contributing. We've been punching way above our weight, contributing to defining for clinical folks, defining for public policy folks, defining for politicians what recovery is, what it is and what it looks like, and how the courage that it takes for an individual to navigate from the depths of personal challenge to a point of being a productive and a committed member of society. This is something that we don't shine, I think, enough light on. I don't think we understand quite fully enough what we're, not only the courage that it takes, but the achievement of every single individual who lives what I like to think of as a sustainable life in recovery. When I first came into this particular field, I've worked in the areas of personal and professional development for a long time. I've been a coach for many decades. I've been a trainer for many decades. But I first took a real interest in recovery somewhere in the aughts. I don't know, what are we calling that first decade of the 21st century? I think of it as the aughts. Somewhere in there, I remember having a conversation with folks from Faces and Voices of Recovery. And the conversation was about, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? And my answer to that, of course, was, I'm a coach. That's what I'm doing. I'm a trainer. That's what I'm doing. I couldn't get more specific than that. But I do remember saying that I'm a coach who works with individuals who are challenged by substance use disorder, challenged by addiction. And I remember the conversation taking off from there about, okay, addiction we know something about. We have a lot of clinical information about addiction. We have a lot of medical information about addiction, going back a long ways. I mean, one place you might start is the doctor's opinion in the, sort of in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, for example. There's medical opinion about addiction right there for you, in a way that I think is easier for the civilian, the non-medical person to understand. But this conversation at Faces and Voices of Recovery was saying we have a lot of information about addiction. Where is the information about recovery? Where is our understanding of how people move through the crisis, however long it takes, move through the crisis and actually establish what is for them a successful life? What is for them a life where they're setting and meeting their own goals? Remember that these early years of the 21st century, we didn't yet have the SAMHSA definition of recovery. These conversations were really trying to map out some territory where we could think in a new way or in a fresh way, and in a way that that maybe held out the promise or the vision of recovery, and that would move us from that that crisis that medical folk manage, that triage approach to addiction, and could actually move us out of there into a thriving model of living successfully in recovery. So this was news to me. This was new thinking to me. You know, sort of for much of the field, it's still new thinking. So being among folks like you on a platform like this is such a balm to me, to be with people who are contributing to what I think of as the solution. I don't know what recovery looks like for you or you or you or you or you. I don't need to know what recovery looks like for you. I only need to know what recovery looks like for me. But if I'm looking at recovery, and if as a coach, I'm working with you on recovery, then all of us here, in one way or another, we're part of the solution. And it's a privilege to be among you on that basis.
All right, Ruth. Now, Diana and Christopher, you've both been made co-hosts, so feel free to jump in anytime and help me out. And Ruth, you know, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but there was we exchanged some emails, and you told me some startling news. And I followed up with that person whose email you gave me, and I asked, why? Why did this happen? And well, I don't know if I'll ever get an answer. Is this something you want to talk about?
Uh, well, that's awfully cryptic, Dan.
Well, don't you remember our emails? It shouldn't be cryptic to you, Ruth. It should be cryptic to everyone else. Because
well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. There's been a change there's been a fairly dramatic change in status in my work life recently, but I'm not commenting publicly on that.
All right. We'll move on. All right. Diana, Christopher,
Yeah.
is this okay? Go ahead.
Hi, Ruth. I appreciate the information and your recollection back to the meetings with Faces and Voices of Recovery. And I really can appreciate the focus here on the recovery-centric portion of the discussion. And did they come up with anything? Did they give you any leads, if you will, as far as like how to transition towards more of a recovery-centric model? Or did they just raise that question of what are we doing?
And it was just a round table kind of conversation. And I think that the momentum behind those conversations that were happening in the nascent recovery community centres and that were happening around SAMHSA, later brought us the SAMHSA definition of recovery. that in itself was, that in itself was news to me when I came across it a couple of years later. The SAMHSA definition of recovery was in itself a round table conversation, a continuation of Faces and Voices of Recovery, a continuation of the conversations in the community. But I think it was a way of bringing those multiple voices together to see, could we actually hammer out a working definition of recovery that we could all get behind operationally? There's going to be as many definitions of recovery as there are people in the room, and that's as it should be. But if we're going to work together at a policy level, if we're going to work together in trainings, if we're going to work together to build a field, or if we're going to work together to build a practice or a profession, we have to have a core definition that we can all get behind, so that we're all at least talking about the same thing while we're having those conversations. So that was percolating at SAMHSA in the last years of the first decade of this century, and I wasn't particularly involved in that. I did know the person who acted as the core facilitator, a gentleman by the name of Tom Hill, and I knew Tom quite well from my life in Washington, D.C. He was friends with friends of mine, and it was a social connection. It wasn't a work connection. I didn't understand it. Actually, he was a major apparatchik in this environment. But Tom's commitment to recovery was such that he stuffed the room, not only with bureaucrats, not only with public policy people, not only with medical opinion, not only with treatment providers, but he brought in people from the recovery community. So there were people in recovery at the table. And for me, that's where the authority, if you like, of the value of the SAMHSA definition really originates. Because like everything else, it came from us, and it came from us in collaboration with other stakeholders. It didn't come from us in our little bubble where we're just talking to each other. There's far too much of that goes on. The SAMHSA definition of recovery came from a true meeting of stakeholders. And when I came across it, eventually I can just imagine what those conversations, what those meetings must have been like. But when I came across the final version, I thought, yes, absolutely, I'm all in on this. Recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. Perfect. There are many things that I liked about it straight off. I really liked the fact that it does not mention alcohol or other drugs or other conditions we might be suffering from. It takes a proactive stance based on a commitment to the health of the individual, whatever our challenges are. I really, really, really like that. I like the fact that it starts by saying, yes, recovery is a process, not an event. Recovery is a process of change. It doesn't say boldly, you gotta change, you gotta change, you gotta change. Although that bold statement can have its uses in other contexts. It talks about a process. And we know that process plays out over time. We also know that the process of change, the process of recovery plays out over a lifetime. We're all improving our health and wellness, even as, sort of we age and become decrepit. We're still working on improving our health and wellness. And the idea of living a self-directed life, that's been core, absolutely core to my practice as a coach and as a trainer forever. I wrote the protocols for coaching in Ireland, and that was the core idea is that of a self-directed life. I don't take my marching orders from an external reality like bottle of Jameson. Jameson is not driving the bus. I'm driving the bus. Now I do that in community, in family, in marital relationships, and I do that with other people. But essentially, addiction in recovery, addiction is no longer driving the bus. And that sense of individuals coming into their own strength, that's been a core principle of mine forever. And Phil Valentine and others in the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery talks about how in a coaching conversation, there are two experts in the room. I'm the expert on my own life, and you are the expert on yours. And it's our mutual recognition that forms the basis of our mutual respect, and forms the very basis of how we do our business together, how we converse together, how we work towards identifying and perhaps implementing your goals for the present moment or situation in your life, and so on and so forth. Two experts in the room. I'm the expert on my life. You're the expert on your life. And, sort of that's so much the thinking, I think, behind the idea of living a self-directed life.
But it's not so easy to be in the room with folks who don't have the lived experience, and yet they're making all these big decisions on our lives. So can you tell us, like, when you first started this work, and how challenging was it to be maybe the only person with lived experience in a room of policymakers?
I've never referred to my lived experience, whatever the hell that is, Dan. I'm a human being. I'm another bozo on the bus. I'm another gal in this room. That's who I am. I do not discuss medical diagnosis or medical history with anybody, especially not in a room of policymakers. It's none of their business. It's my personal business, and I'm keeping it that way. What I have in common with you is my humanity. And I have my experience of living as a human being under various particular challenges. Substance use disorder might be only one of them. Trust me, where I come from, it's a real challenge to have been a woman, to have been born female. And we have many other challenges. I inherited the challenge of high blood pressure from my father. I base, as a coach, I base my connection with you on my connection with you as a human being. All human beings suffer. All human beings know loss. All human beings know fear. All human beings, we hope, certainly in recovery, have a chance at knowing love. Maybe romantic love, maybe not, but certainly love, the love of our fellows. And it's that that common humanity is what unites me with my clients as a coach. If I'm in a room full of policymakers, I'll just be banging the drum for whatever the hell policy I'm advocating for today. And I certainly will be advocating for that policy on the basis of its merits, not on the basis of, sort of my story. In fact, I'm so bored with my story, I won't be talking to anybody about it. But I will be talking about advocacy matters on the basis of the merits of the argument. So, for example, we talk about, or we advocate for peers on the basis that we can show the kind of outcomes that policymakers and the people who disperse my tax dollars care about. Improved medical outcomes, less recidivism, less return to use, less use of costly medical services, less use of costly policing services, less costs to the public purse. These are identifiable outcomes of including peers in a continuum of care. And if I'm in a room where I'm going to be advocating for better pay, better working conditions, better respect would go a long way, then these are the kind of merit-based arguments that I'm going to be making. I don't expect anybody to give a fiddlers for my for the story of my life. I really don't. But I do expect people who are responsible for the public purse to care about the strategic use of taxpayer dollars to effect better outcomes in the community.
Because frequently when they ask they ask us to lobby, right? They say, oh yes, share your story, because the policymaker needs to see you as a human being, not just a statistic, and share your story to make the best impact. And that's what you're here. That's why we brought you here. It's just to share your story.
This is not a meeting of policymakers, so the interests are different. Dan, I've spent a lifetime listening to that argument, and not just in terms of addiction or indeed mental health issues. I've spent a lifetime listening to the argument that when women advocate for specific rights, that what you do is you put somebody out there who has direct personal experience of whatever the issue is. My experience, call it lived experience if you like, my experience is that individual's story either doesn't land at all or is identified solely with that individual. Oh, that individual, oh, Mary so-and-so told a compelling story. Now, meanwhile, where's the data on outcomes? And I think that the truth of that, as I say, I've been watching it for a long number of years. The truth of that is compounded by the fact that if you tell your story about whatever it is, social issue that you think needs to be changed because it impacted you and it impacted you negatively, and you have some great suggestions for how to improve the situation. When you make it personal, you also make it personal for your listener. Now, I have no idea what my listener, call him Andrew Cuomo, I have no idea what my listener's experience of alcoholism is. I have no idea what family stories he's filtering this information through. I have no idea what level of commitment he has to stigmatizing people with alcoholism. I have no information about whether his life, his childhood was wrecked by Uncle Tom every Thanksgiving dinner, face down in the turkey, like clockwork. And I'm never going to be able to speak to that stigma if all I've got is my little story that can be dismissed on its merits or otherwise. I'm not putting myself out there for that, and frankly, I don't think it's efficacious. And I've certainly noticed I've certainly noticed how unuseful it is, in part by paying attention to how long we've been doing this, how long we've been putting our personal stories front and center, getting nowhere. Because that wall of stigma is not addressed. If I have Uncle Tom in my background and I have a fixed opinion about alcoholics, thanks to Uncle Tom and all the unresolved negative feeling attached to Uncle Tom, I'm not going to be able to see and hear you. You are not going to be talking my language. If all you have to rely on is that, oh yeah, you're one of Uncle Tom's tribe.
All right. Now we have Ruth, are you here in 2 boxes? We have someone named Rue. Is that also you, Ruth, or is that someone new?
I hope not.
Hello, Rue. How are you?
Got a little poem going there, Dan.
Let me let me ask them to unmute themselves. Oh, hi. Oh, Rue said hi.
Hi.
Hi, Rue. Tell us about yourself.
Oh, about myself? Well, I just okay. Well, this is recent, right? I had just resigned from a job where I was working as a peer counselor and had my peer specialist and SERPA certifications. So I'm just here to I got an email recently about Ruth speaking, so I'm just popping in to hear what she has to say. You know.
Are you a Ruth Riddick fan, Rue?
Well, this is actually my first time hearing about her, but you know.
Oh my God. Okay, that's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, Ruth. I apologize for that.
Pleasure to meet you, Rue.
Nice to meet you too.
Okay. Serena. Hello, Serena. How are you?
Such a lovely name.
I will ask her to unmute or them. Serena, are you there? All right. Well, I think Serena's probably making dinner right now. Diana, is there anything on your mind?
Oh, I love what Ruth said. You're very humble and you talk the truth. You talk the truth and you put me to think about how recovery is always ongoing, always will be. You know, wherever you go, you know, the parties, the friends, you know, the TV, the commercials, and I I go back to those that are in recovery and you know I see myself that way, you know, I struggle and it's just an ongoing thing, but I think about the youth that are really, really caught up in you know in deep you know drugs and I wonder they go into these places, you know, to try to clean themselves up, but they do great, you know, the 90 days or 28 days. And then I think the key is the preparation of that discharge. where they're going. A lot of them are in their 30s, they can't go back home. Like, we need something more solid, because that's such an important transition, and we don't have enough of that. And I think once you have something more concrete that the government puts, to help these youths, because they're considered adults, right? But if we can get, I guess, more stories on recovery and what it is, like, I wish there was, now we have the Bible, and you read through the stories. I wish they had like some type of manual that we can listen to how everyone stays clean, because it's hard. It's hard work. It's hard work. It really is. And it's a everyday, just like you have the serenity prayer, and you don't know, when you're weak, there's times where human beings were weak, and we have to mentally prepare for those holidays, but I wish there was more support. I wish,
Well-
even from family members,
Mhm.
right?
Diana, you're speaking absolutely to where I live. There's no question about that. We do not have a vision. It's the vision thing. We do not have a vision of what recovery might look like for the individual patient in a treatment program. And the professionals, most of the professionals that those patients are interacting with are in triage mode. They're trying to, 28 days for just to detox.
Exactly.
Sort of in the old days, 12 steppers used to say, it takes 5 years to get your marbles back. And 28 days just doesn't stack up. But the people who are working with us during that 28-day period, they're working flat out. But they're in triage mode. Now, when you're shaking and baking, that's an expression I picked up in Maine, Dan, I really like it. When, sort of when we're shaking and baking, that withdrawal piece, I don't have a vision of anything. I don't have a vision of a balanced checkbook. I don't have a vision of, a nice place to live. I barely have a vision of what the next item of clothing I'm going to put on is. So we can't ask people who are, patients or clients or whatever we want to call them. We can't ask them to supply the vision thing. We've got to supply the vision thing. And in my experience, we're very weak on that. So 10 years ago, when I joined this particular field here in New York City, and I took a training called the Recovery Coach Academy, written by the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery, I came across a model in there called the stages of recovery. And boy, is it the vision thing. It's it's laid out, sort of not so much as this is written in stone, this is the 10 Commandments. It's laid out on the understanding that recovery is a process of change. But if we do certain tasks, if we do certain footwork, iteratively, we get better. We get more skilled at driving our own bus. And what the stages of recovery model does is lays out what that looks like. What you're likely to be doing and experiencing in year 1, in year 3, in year 5 or 6, in year 10 plus. There is a model. It's a real challenge to bring this model to folks who don't believe in recovery. It's also a real challenge to bring this model to individuals who are still shaking and baking, because the vision thing isn't on the horizon yet. It's the stabilization today. And how am I going to pay the rent today? That's what I'm working with when I'm shaking and baking. So it becomes, I think, the responsibility of professionals like coaches, like me, to be evangelical about the stages of recovery model. And I am. I have a weekend retreat coming up in early September, where we will be working the stages of recovery model, and we'll be doing it through the medium of psychodrama. So we'll be getting out of our heads, getting into our relational bodies, working with those dynamics, those interpersonal dynamics, working with the energies in the room to build our personal vision of what the stages of recovery model is saying to us, so that we in turn can reach out the hand of coaching, of peer support to the folks we're working with, and help them to develop a vision of their own recovery that's about who they are. Because at the end of the day, they're still the expert on their own life. So, you know, your recovery will cycle through the stages in a different way from mine, but we will probably be doing all of these tasks, and we will probably be hitting these milestones, and we will probably be having this subjective experience, and we will probably end up paying our bills.
When you said that, I thought about, you know, the underserved, how they're really working hard to you know, to keep themselves clean, and then they go right back. It could start right in their own home, right? And how hard it is to really just say, you know what, I'm gonna be that game changer. I'm gonna it's gonna stop with me, you know? But-
Or I'm going to start with having some meaning and purpose in my life.
Mhm.
And that's where I think the coaching model really comes in. And if I'm going to have meaning and purpose in a life where I blew up my resume, for example, then one of the things I'm going to be working with the coach on is, you know, sort of how do I communicate my value as a potential employee when I've got a resume that reads like Swiss cheese. And that's not something I'm going to be thinking about usefully while I'm still shaking and baking. But 6 or 9 months down the road, when I've experienced better health, when I've freed up a little bit more of my mind, body, spirit to actually start grappling with my life, that might be a point when, you know, sort of some input from a coach on repairing my CV and how do I go about finding a job, that might be helpful. Or just trundling down to McDonald's and saying, I need a job. You know, teach me how to come in every day for my shift. Teach me how to go home every day after my shift and not worry about it because I did my best. Teach me how to work in my shift. Teach me that you will pay me every week that I work. Teach me how, you know, sort of, I then graduate to the next level of figuring out how do I best use that money? What are the bills that I have to pay this week? What is the money I can just about, maybe it's only $1, set aside for some other purpose this week? these are the, these are what used to be called baby steps, what we now call recovery capital. And this is where the post-acute service gap really lies. There's a tremendous value having peers in emergency rooms, tremendous value in having peers on treatment court teams, tremendous value anywhere you put peers. But there's still a gap in that, I've come out of treatment, I've come out of jail, I've come out of, sort of whatever. Now what? And now what extends for months while I'm building a foundation for a life in recovery.
So that's where the community comes in to fill that gap. Ideally, if the person is starting their recovery and there's this gap of you're on your own gap, if the person can somehow connect to a community, I mean, that's why, you mentioned finding purpose. Isn't that why the AA model and the NA model are so successful? People are finding purposes in helping other people, in providing peer support. There's a purpose in giving back, and it helps with one's own recovery.
Well, indeed, the preamble, the 12-step preamble directly mentions it. My primary purpose is to stay sober and help another alcoholic achieve sobriety. My primary purpose. So that, so the idea of purpose and the importance of purpose is baked into the 12-step model, whether that's, sort of your pathway of recovery or not. But, the recovery community organizations do a magnificent job, absolutely magnificent job. But no more than 12 steps are for everybody. Recovery community organizations aren't for everybody either. So we need to be thinking about where are the gaps. From my perspective, I see a real gap in the availability of recovery coaching, whether, however that's deployed across the continuum of care. But, I'm a deep and committed believer in the efficacy of coaching. Coaching differs from therapy. Coaching is about the logistics. Coaching is about the practical realities. Coaching is about, what do we need to make happen today that meets your goal for today? What do we need to put in place today? I do think that, I do think that there's a tremendous need for recovery coaching services across the board, and very particularly to nurture that vision thing, to nurture the idea that, there's a roadmap, if you like, a roadmap of recovery.
And any of these tools, these purposeful tools, these purpose finding tools, these community tools, can any of it be successful without the commitment and participation of the individual after they've decided that they have had enough with the type of life that they're living?
I would strongly argue, Dan, first of all, I think that's a great question. I would strongly argue that you only get out of anything what you put in. If you're not on board with this modality or that modality or this pathway or the other options, if you're not on board, then you're not on board and you're not going to be going anywhere. So I would agree with you absolutely that the bottom line is the engagement of the individual. And again, I think that's where peer services and recovery coaching is into its own at that, while we're still in the triage stage, as a bridge back to life, if you like, coin a phrase. So, but at the end of the day, that engaging with the individual, that's the toughest part of all of it. If you don't want what I have, or if you don't want what I have to offer, well, there you go.
Nothing happens until someone's made a decision about their life.
And the
Chris.
chemistry,
Oh, yeah.
the chemistry. I mean, you're a wonderful person. I mean, you got me sold. Like I'm ready to go and meet you in Brooklyn, you know. But it's like the chemistry. It plays such a big role. Your approach, you know, your energy, you know, there's so many factors on because you said it right. The word is triage, and you know that person has to be ready. Are you ready? You came this far, right? You got all those toxins out of your system. We're waiting for you with open arms. But if that person doesn't have, besides the will, you got to have the will. But if whoever you meet at that point is so critical.
So thank you, Diane. I absolutely agree with you. And I'd like to get back to something that Dan said that introduced you there, and now I'm blanking on it. The toughest training group that I ever had was a room full of social workers who were burnt out, who were complaining about the revolving door, you know, the revolving door. You know, sort of who really couldn't get their heads around anything other than those bloody addicts. They're good for nothing. So there's an answer for that too. So I suggested to them that this is where the stages of change model is so helpful. The stages of change model was developed in the 1980s. It's not news. There's several people on this call who weren't born when the stages of change model was first developed. Now, I heard one of the co-authors, James Prochaska, talk about the stages of change model several years ago in Syracuse, and he sold me. He said two things. He said the stages of change model maps out how change happens. A process. Stages of change model maps it out. The second thing that I loved was what he said. He said about how folks like my social workers, my burnt out social workers, and like all the rest of us, we want people to be making change now, today, immediately. Get sober, shape up, sharpen up, you know, do it now. We want people to be in action. Prochaska pointed out that his model, the stages of change model, action is stage 4, not stage 1 or 2, stage 4. And the first stage in your stages of change model is called pre-contemplation, when you have absolutely zero intent of making any change at all, despite the fact that this is now your 20th time in the emergency room with a needle hanging out of your arm. The fact that your social work thinks it's time for you to make a change doesn't matter a damn. You're still in pre-contemplation and coming back to the ER with the needles hanging out of your arm. That's just the price of of being able to use. And it isn't until people start thinking about change, start researching their options, start thinking very seriously about what is that action piece that I need to put in place in order to have a different outcome. Stage 4 in the stages of change model. So I presented this to my social workers, and they looked at me Nothing in their training had exposed them to the stages of change model. And every single one of them were in exactly that place that James Petraska identified. They all wanted people to make change now. You know, sort of, I've got this great plan for you, do it now. And they're talking to people who are in stage 1 or stage 2. They're not nowhere near making any kind of action step that's going to satisfy these well-intentioned social workers. So of course they're burnt out. They're dealing all day, every day with their failed expectations of other people. Can't be done. I have absolutely no power to make you do a damn thing, however well-intentioned I am, or however good for you it would be. I don't have that power. And neither does any social worker. Only you have the power to change your life. And you will make that change when you're ready. When your stars are aligned.
Possibly.
That-
Oh, go ahead, Diana.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's part of the biggest problem, that the social workers that, as you said, they're all burned out. They don't have time to learn about what you're talking about. You know, the trainings, the importance of peers. You know, the value of peers. You know, it's like you work with a multidisciplinary team, and they're like, well, you know what, you don't have a degree, so they dismiss you right away. You know, and we come with a lot, not just our lived experience, but if we're around it enough, you know, we have our own experience of, wow, you know what, this reminds me of a case that I was working with, and what we did was A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the thing is, they're not, a lot of them are not open to it. Not because they don't want to, that it depends who's in the room, you know, if the supervisor's in there, they all have to play the game, you know, and agree. There's so much.
Perhaps the social workers can be trained in gardening, because then they'll learn that sometimes the seeds that they plant don't take root, and
I like that.
they'll learn patience, and they'll learn to
love
never stop planting
I
the
love
seeds.
that.
Christopher, you've been silent. What's on your mind?
I've been really enjoying the discussion here, and I appreciate the focus, of course, on the recovery-centric principles, but also, you know, really questioning some of the existing systems of care and the approaches that we're taking. And, you know, I've often found myself frustrated with circumstances where people are not necessarily offered the opportunity to kind of slow down and sharpen the axe before they cut down more trees. And I really think some of the approaches that are taken now is, you know, we're so overburdened in the healthcare systems, and it's just this mad rush. And I like what Diana said about not everybody has the time to kind of absorb new information and like new perspectives on things. And I often wondered myself, how do we mold these existing systems of care to be recovery centric and, you know, help shape things in the way that we know they need to go? And, you know, it's of course a long arduous process, I'm sure. But yeah, if you have some insight on that, Ruth, that would be appreciated. Yeah, systems advocacy.
Absolutely. And frankly, I would start, Christopher, I would start by renaming treatment centers as triage centers, because that's what they do. You come out of a treatment center, maybe with some physical integrity restored, maybe. For 28 days or even 60 days, especially if you're in pre-contemplation. You're not thinking about a change, making a change. You don't see any need for a change. In fact, you're just kind of looking forward to your next hit. This is not treatment. This is triage. We've kept you alive for 28 days, whether you wanted us to or not. kept you alive for 60 days, whether you wanted us to or not. Now what? And it's the now what piece that, you can't, I don't believe you can develop a discharge plan with somebody who is shaking and baking and who has no interest in making a change. You're just spinning your wheels. And I think a lot of what passes for treatment is just people, good people, spinning their wheels. Any environment where you're spinning your wheels, of course you're going to get burnt out. Of course you are. So, two things. You've got to have medical detox, whatever people are detoxing from. People think that, alcohol detox is safe enough. It isn't. You can die from unsupervised alcohol detox. So, sort of that's what expert detox, inpatient, medically supervised, absolutely essential. The next step, if you want to call it the rehabilitative step, is engaging with the individual, and engaging with the individual on the basis of, well, Christopher, here we are again, back in ER. You must like the cooking here, do you? And that's the kind of engagement I mean. And, if Christopher and I can bond over the rubbish hospital food, maybe Christopher and I can, talk a little bit about, well, what's going on, Christopher? Where are you working? Oh, you're not working. Oh, what are you doing for money? Oh, you're robbing for money. How's that working for you? And, and maybe Christopher and I can come to some glimmer of understanding that, at the end of the day, it doesn't actually have to be like this. And that's, that's the most important message in the early stages, in my view. You don't have to live like this. We'll still be here for you. We'll resuscitate you, we'll Narcan you, we'll detox you, but you don't have to do it this way. There is an alternative, truly. It's a really powerful message. But then I have to believe it. If I'm going to be a credible messenger, I have to believe that recovery is possible. And if we're not training people, we're not training our social workers, we're not training our medical staff, we're not training our clinicians, we're not training our people in recovery, and they see the same people coming back revolving door, why would we expect them to believe in it? They don't see it. And that's again where the vision thing comes in. And I'm somebody who's evangelical about the vision thing. And recovery is the vision thing, a process of change. And it's okay, Christopher, if you're in pre-contemplation today. It's okay if you're shaking and baking. It's okay if we, if we nearly lost you. It really is truly okay. I don't have a dog in the fight of your life. But, but it doesn't have to be like this.
I have been chatting with Serena. She's really enjoying this conversation, by the way. And I was wondering if Serena, would you care to speak and share any thoughts you have with us if your mic is working? I will ask you to unmute. And
I had struggle, I had steal, and all of these things could have been prevented.
Wow, Serena, you sound like Malcolm X. We can hear you, Serena. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey. I'm so sorry about the background noise. I'm trying to turn it down. Give me one moment. I'm working right now. 1 second, please. I'm trying to get this down if you hear it.
It's a lot better now.
Okay, good. Hi, I'm Serena. I'm from New Jersey. I work with Collaborative Support Programs of New Jersey. I am the advocacy coordinator. I am a certified recovery support practitioner and certified peer recovery specialist. I oversee the operations of our peer-run wellness centers on the grounds of the state psychiatric hospitals. And I also work with our peer-run respites. And I heard about this tonight through National Coalition of Mental Health Recovery, where we've been to DC with them the past 2 years. So thank you for having me tonight.
Do you have any response to anything that's been said here? Like any, do you also have a background in substance use, or is it strictly mental health?
Both, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
What do you think of now, Ruth? It's called, what is it called? The phases of change. What did you call that?
The Stages of Change model by James Prochaska and Carlo Di Clemente was developed in the 1980s as a way of mapping out how we make any kind of change, little change, big change, medium-sized change, the stages of change model. 5 stages, and you walk through them in order every time you decide to do anything.
Serena, are you familiar with the status of change model?
No, I'm actually more used to hearing it as motivational interviewing, maybe with the stages of change, but I never heard this approach before.
MI often allies itself absolutely with stages of change model, and certainly I think motivational interviewing skills are very helpful for communicators, including coaches. But the stages of change model exists as a separate model and developed completely separately and by different people from motivational interviewing. And
the stages of change model is for all addictions?
It's for all change, Dan.
It's more than addictions.
It's how do you decide to buy an automobile? First, at some point, you haven't thought at all about buying an automobile. You're fine without an automobile. That's pre-contemplation. Stage 2, contemplation. Now you're thinking, it'd be great to get around easier if I had an automobile. That's contemplation. Stage 3, preparation. I've gone down to the showroom, and I've interviewed the guy in the showroom. I've looked at different models. I've thought about different models, what I like, what kind of color I'd like. And I've asked about pricing. I've figured out how I'm going to pay for this thing. I've done my research. That's stage 3, preparation. Stage 4, action. I'm biting the bullet. I'm buying this automobile. I like it. I can afford it. I know I'm going to have a great time driving around in this automobile. Stage 4, action. Stage 5 is when I've had this automobile for a minimum of 6 months. It's really working for me. I love it. That was a great decision I made. I did the right amount of preparation. I found the automobile that has my name on it. I've been driving it around for 6 months, and I am a happy camper. That's stage 5, maintenance. That's the stages of change model applied to the decision to buy an automobile. It's how the model works. I love it. Works for anything.
And how popular is this model? I mean, you believe this model will be effective in helping folks recover, or at least effective in helping the practitioners to be mindful of these stages of change when working with clients?
Bingo, bingo. The value of any model is a way of helping us to think about what's going on here. It's not you know, you do this and then you do this and then you do this. It's not about plotting. It's about understanding that there's a dynamic in play here. So if I'm talking to you about your automobile, Dan, I'm going to be listening out to, you know, where you're at, clues about where you're at. So so you might tell me something like, I'm thinking of buying an automobile. Well, now I know right out of the gate that you're in stage 2, because you told me you're thinking about this, making this change. Or you might say to me, Ruth, you won't believe this. I went down and I talked to Gus in the showroom, and he has the exact right car for me. And I had a great conversation with him about the money, and it comes in right on my budget. What do you think of that? And I'll be able to say, wow, Dan, sounds like you've done your preparation. You might want to think about making that purchase. Get that automobile for yourself. And I'll come back to you 6 months later, see how you're getting on with it.
So
That's
folks can be
that's how the
encouraging.
model works.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Folks can be encouraging, practitioners, nurses, doctors, social workers. They can be encouraging for individuals to keep going. Yeah.
Dan,
Very good.
you had asked about the prevalence of the stages of change model, and maybe think back to the instructional material that we have here in Illinois for the Recovery Support Specialist program. So this is the study guide for the Illinois Certified Recovery Support Specialist credential. And in there, we've got the stages of change model. I know it's probably hard to read. It's basically the same thing that Ruth is explaining, except this is a little bit truncated. It's 5 stages. For whatever reason, they don't have preparation in here. They jump from contemplation to action, essentially. So, but basically the concept is the same, and the ideas and principles are the same. But yeah, it is something that I'm familiar with. I'm going to look into a little bit, and I'll probably inquire, I guess, as to why they're missing that one step there compared to the model Ruth shared with us.
So that's great, Christopher. I think that the stages of change model has been more popular in, sort of in addiction treatment and recovery circles than in the wider community. To be honest with you, I think that anybody who has any role at all in what we used to call the helping professions, doesn't matter what you're doing, who you're working with. This is essential information, in my view, essential information. You're talking
Bruce,
to, yeah.
Okay, you made the case for not phases of change. What is it? Something
Stages.
of change, stages of change. You made the case. It can work. It can work for the wider community when they're talking about automobiles. It can work for the addictions community when working with clients. It can work for mental health. But now we have 15 minutes left, 14 minutes actually. Why are there addictions at all? Why are people addicted? Ruth, what's your opinion on this?
I have no idea. I have no idea, Dan. What a great question. I tend to stay out of those kind of conversations. What I'm interested in, and I've always been interested in, is how can I support you putting the infrastructure in place in your life that will get you where you want to be. Now, in recent years, and the last 10 years, we've started calling that recovery capital. How can I help you build your recovery capital? Well, that's just such a, I mean, I'm really not a jargon girl. I don't like it. If I wouldn't say it to my best friend, I don't bother saying it to anybody else, Well, hello there, Sherry, my best friend, what did you put together for your recovery capital today? Well, I'm probably not going to talk to her like that. I'm probably going to say, wow, Sherry, that's a fabulous new shirt. It is new, isn't it? You look just brilliant. Is that something you're going to wear to your job interview tomorrow? That's the way I talk to people. And I don't get involved in any of these controversies. So like I don't talk about the God issue to anybody. Well, maybe I do in Starbucks. I don't talk to anybody about what is addiction or where does addiction come from, because I don't care. I'm not the person who's interested in those questions. I'm not the person who's interested in putting solutions or strategies or suggestions together around that. If the God concept is important to you, I'm your woman. We're going to have a great conversation about that. But I don't need to know, and I don't need to know before I come into the conversation. You are going to tell me what I need to know. And I'm going to ask you. Okay, okay, Dan, I hear you talking about God quite a bit. And tell me a bit more about, sort of where does God figure in all this? And you'll tell me. Just as if I see you walking into the room on crutches, I don't need to know, how many breaks you have in your legs. You're going to tell me. Hi there, Dan. I see you're on crutches. What's going on? You're going to tell me. I don't need to know anything about broken bones. Yeah, that's what we've got doctors for. But I can ask you how long you expect to be in plaster. And we can talk about, sort of what challenges does having your legs in plaster raise for you? What barriers are there that you didn't have before you broke your legs? And how are you navigating those barriers? Is there an elevator in the closest subway stop to your home, for example, or your work? They're the kind of questions. I don't need to know the answer to that because you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me that, yeah, Bay Ridge Station on the R train, 96th Street, they're putting the final touches to the elevator there, and not a minute too soon for me because here I am on crutches. I can't climb up all those stairs to get up to the library at the top of the stairs in Bay Ridge. You're going to tell me.
All right, Ruth. So yes, from your perspective and the work that you do, there's no need to address those questions. But do you believe that it is important for some individuals with the capacity and the time and the effort and the profession revolving around the causal issues, the issues of, there's a lot of talk about trauma and its effect on human development and everything. Is it important for people to discuss what are the root causes in order to help with to reach people where you're at and beyond, and et cetera, et cetera?
It's important for us to discuss everything, Dan. It's important for us to follow our curiosity. It's important for us to research questions that are important to us. It's important that we all use our talents. Some of us are scientific people. Some of us are medical people. That's where our stars take us. This is so important. We're an interdependent species. I do my bit, you do your bit, Diana does her bit, Christopher does his bit, Serena does her bit. And together we build whatever we build. The state of our world today. It's all of us together.
Well put. Now, Ruth, you're a poet and a writer. Do you have a poem that you have readily available or memorized that you feel would be appropriate?
No, I don't. Thank you. Thank you for asking. Dan, that's exactly the kind of thing that my memory is not built for. But poetry has been a very important part of my life, all my life. Language is one of the things that really galvanizes me. I come from a bilingual country. The Irish national language is Irish, not English. The first language that I spoke was English, but I did my schooling through the medium of Irish. So I learned mathematics, I learned history, I learned civics, I learned whatever I learned through Irish, not through English. So that comes up with that can be interesting at times. And poetry is the sort of the refinement of the use of language, allowing us to think new thoughts, to distill our experiences in new ways. And, and that's just so meaningful to me. So much so, I remember a very long time ago when I was midway through my teenage years, my French teacher, my French language teacher, actually apologized to me that the school curriculum had changed, and they were phasing out the study of French poetry. And she apologized to me because she said to me, I know you're interested, but we can't do it anymore. And I thought that was one of those wonderful moments for me, when a person with that kind of authority saw me with that clarity and actually addressed the issue with me. It was a wonderful, wonderful moment. So I've studied poetry in French, in the Irish language, in English, of course. I have some major favorites. I have some I don't bother much reading. But recently I've come to very much appreciate an unlikely candidate, Charles Bukowski, the American. I suspect that he was a truly wonderful writer. And of course, a martyr, an absolute martyr to alcoholism and other substances, for all I know. But from time to time, people post poems of his on Facebook, and they're real poems. They aren't just sort of thoughts strung together with no shape or form or art, if you like. They're real poems. And every time I read his name, I think, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to get serious about this guy. I have to read him. And that's the, sort of these are the enthusiasms that we never talk about when we're inventorying recovery capital. But these are the enthusiasms, and we all have them, that keep us afloat, even at the darkest times.
That's a beautiful way to close this group, Ruth. Thank you. Christopher, Diana, any parting words?
A big thank you, and I learned so much. And as we're talking, I thank you, Christopher. He put, I don't know if you could see in the chat, Ruth, he actually put the diagram, and I just sent that to my friend.
Sure.
That she's struggling in Florida again, and I love your example of you already thinking about buying the car. So that will be circle number 2.
Yeah.
I mean, the analogy on point. So thank you for this vital information.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And thank you for all your work, Ruth. I appreciate you spending time here with us today, and it's been a wonderful discussion. Definitely leaving on an inspired note here today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Christopher.